Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for spending some time with me here on April 27th as we continue our discussion about reforming mission. As always, please feel free to ask questions. This is your time. This is your time to ask any questions, from serious to silly, to have a conversation, to have a discussion, and to see where it leads. As I continue to say, this is an open time of discussion, and it's a way for you to ask some questions, for you to hear some answers. And if you have questions that you're unsure that you want to have public, please feel free to put them over in a direct message to me, and I will make sure to answer them either directly or to spend some time in one of these to focus on that with you. Hope wherever you are today, you are doing well and spending some time together with whoever it is, with whatever it looks like out where you are today. I wanted to start this morning, and again, we'll see where it goes, but to talk a little bit about language and what that means for us. And I'm doing this because apparently I caused some something unique that hasn't happened to me before. I posted yesterday that a mentor of mine was on palliative care, and that blew up. That, for me to see so many people sending prayers and concerns and just commenting on him was really powerful for me. He is a mentor of mine. He always has been. He was fantastic during my candidacy committee. Just a blessing to have as someone who was there and who continues to be there through my ministry. He was a great jokester and just had this great look about him from the years that I'd seen him. But when I posted that, I heard what many of you heard of palliative care, that it was a diagnosis of limited time left. That is not the case, and I hope through my updates that has come across. I've heard that he is home. He's doing well after his surgery. It's more of, working with him, and he still has that same sideways glance that I'm sure if he heard about this, he would be giving me now, wondering what is going on. So I just, what strikes me, and it does and it doesn't, is this notion of language and how we use language and how we interpret language and how we misinterpret language. It is so challenging in our digital world to hear the emotion, hear the inflection behind the written word. I think that's why a lot of the apps like TikTok and things like that have spun up so quickly, is because people get, and they're short snippets, but they get, a voice gets out there, the recordings, the video, the audio podcasts and things like that, things like this, because we can see, we can hear the inflection, the understanding, but even that we still get confused by sometimes, and we misinterpret. But the same can be true for the written word, because we don't know, what that means. We don't know necessarily where the person was in their frame of mind when they were writing it. Were they angry? Were they upset? Were they disappointed? What does that mean sometimes by that? And then how do we interpret it with where we are in that time, in that moment? And I think that is so important too for us to recognize, to check in on, and to see for ourselves, how do we interpret that, and what does it mean if we're confused by something, or if it doesn't seem to fit into our model, our understanding, do we go beyond? Do we react, or do we reach out for clarification? And I think, as I think about this notion of reforming, part of reforming is reaching out, is asking for clarification. It's finding that balance, that understanding, to be able to engage in conversation, engage in dialogue, and to see that from several points of view, if we are able. And that's tricky, because our emotions can overshadow, our emotions can seek to hold us, because it keeps us, I guess, from wanting to experience it, because whether it's we feel we know best, or we've done this before, or whatever, but I think there's a sense of opportunity to grow and to understand, and to offer those more fully, more deeply, so that we come to know how to interact with one another better. And I think that post that I shared was a perfect example of how we can interpret something that isn't necessarily the case. But then the next question in that, and again, if you have questions or comments in all of this, please feel free to share them. But the next step is, how do we take a step back? How do we reform that understanding? How do we, if it's something that we've done, that we've always done, that someone comes up and shares with us, something, and do we immediately become defensive, or are we able to take a step back and see where they're coming from? And that doesn't always necessarily mean we will change our action or our thought processes or whatever. But I think just that simple step of taking a step back, of listening to what they have to say, of truly listening and ingesting that, can mean a lot. I think it's important for us to see that, and to see where people are, and to see some of that comes from pain and from grief, from anger, from animosity, and so some of that has to be weighed in, and we have to be able to let some of that go. But part of being willing and able to reform is to be willing to continue learning, to learn about ourselves, to learn about the world around us, to learn about God, to learn about our mission, to learn about our purpose, and to continue moving forward. Good morning, Kim. Good to see you. And Teresa, glad you're both on this morning. And I think that those steps of reformation, those steps of reforming, can be big. We can make huge changes in our lives, and those happen. But they also can be incremental. They can be small. They can be ones that people may not notice at first, and yet begin to change who we are, or how we see things, how we see the world around us, what we're open to, what engages us, what helps us see where God is, or where we are, and it helps, and it can help to clarify what our purpose is, what our mission is. How do we seek to live in community? Where I came from in upstate New York, where I served up there, I remember some of the people saying, we lived in, and some of you may have heard of the company before. We lived in a small town that for years had the Beech-Nut baby food, and they did more than baby food and everything like that. But the executives would basically ran the town because it was just so big. Almost everybody worked there, or had a connection, and they would do things like call a worker into the office and be like, you need to paint your house this weekend. So, there was this sense of, connectedness. Kim says, you're talking about common courtesy. I don't know why it's been okay not to accept other opinions and maybe transform the way things are because of other viewpoints. I think that's it. I think it's, how do we respect diversity in some things? How do we challenge one another when we disagree respectfully? And how do we seek to continue that conversation? And I think that's part of it too, is that we will say our piece, but we don't care what the other person says. And I think all of this comes back to the willingness of all people involved. You can speak to your blue in the face. You can ask to have some feedback, or have continued conversation. But if the person or if the group isn't willing, there's only so much you can do. But that also then, doing that can harden people, can start to go, well, if they're not, if this group's not going to listen to me, what's the point? Why would I not? Why would I just, no one is, or whatever. And we can continue to do this. Yes, respect, and I think that's it. And some of it, and we see this in our world, we see this in our nation, this divisiveness, this inability to speak with one another, and yet these really deeply held convictions of people, that in some instances people aren't willing to even listen, or to go, well, that's not true, that's not true, that's not. And and the thing is, again, as we talk about reforming, I think one of the caveats, one of the things that we have to understand is, and possibly add to that, is that's not true in my understanding. That's not true in my experience, because we don't have the same experience. I don't have the same experience as an African American man in who's grown up with struggles, or grown up in affluency. I don't have those experiences. I don't have the experience of a mother. So I think it's allowing that diversity. Teresa says, listening to merely learn, understand, or accept, not to retaliate, judge, or just give an answer. Yeah, and I think that's it. How do we do that? And I think so long we have done that, where that's all we seek to do: retaliate, judge, give an answer, and we almost come to expect it now from someone. And so, while someone's talking, we're immediately trying to figure out what we're going to say, how we're going to respond, what we're going to say to them. And we don't take the time to listen to what they fully have to say, process it, and then respond. And there's this immediacy that we can't have silence in that time of conversation, because whether maybe it's on the phone and people are you still there? Can you hear me now? Or maybe it's well, we only have a limited amount of time, so we just have to get through this. But I think being able and open to learning is powerful. One of the things we did at Allegheny, where I serve and have been blessed to serve, is that we changed some language for our what used to be called Sunday school, and sharing why we changed that, what triggers when people think of school, and then on Sunday to faith formation, because it's this notion of no matter how old we are, we continually have an opportunity to learn something new. And whether it's something that we've held on to for all of our lives or something that we've recently experienced, that can help us grow in our midst, in our faith and our understanding, in our purpose, in our clarity of that purpose for the world around us. Paul says, I absolutely love a conversation with someone I disagree with. You learn so much more than just conversing with friends, all who agree on things. Yeah, and that's just it. And to have those conversations, to be willing to be a little bit vulnerable and humble, that we don't know everything, that our view isn't the view. Does that make sense? Our view, our understanding of the world isn't the only one that is there, that can take place, that happens in America or in Pennsylvania or in this small area, this not small area, this area. How do we have those conversations? We have this opportunity, we have the technology to have those conversations across states. I know Paul is joining us from Texas this morning as he's finished work. Across the globe, when I was in my class on mission and the marginalized, we had people from Russia, from the African continent, and having some of those broad conversations. We had people from the Midwest and California, and so how do we have these conversations anymore? And to go beyond it, and this is sort of a sneak peek for this Sunday's sermon, or at least the part that I'm sort of working on right now. It's one thing to go to that conversation. It's another thing to go beyond that conversation. And this is sort of where the reforming mission comes in for this week, as I've sort of woven it through. And sort of, I think, where you are all on this path with me, hopefully I'm making some coherent sense, but I want to pull this up to just share with you. We hear about this, and I was struck by this one pastor author writes, I've learned a tremendous amount from folks who disagree with me, but I'm struck how seldom the conversation moves to a discussion about what Jesus actually wants for us and from us, about what Jesus might actually do in the face of the problems we're talking about. And I think that's really powerful, because we talk about us. We talk about me, about my wants, about what it should do for me, or how I expect it to be, how I want it, me. Did you hear that in those? But we miss the next step of how do we see God at work? How do we see God at work in the conversation? How do we see God at work in the movement forward? How do we see God at work in the challenges? And I think that's it. As we reform, as we work forward, as we work to understand some of this, um, to work on ourselves, to have a clearer vision of our purpose and how we form that. We have to recognize that it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be simple. It's not going to be, this quick, easy transformation. That it's no big deal. Reforming takes effort. It can be painful. It can, be some of the worst things that you've gone through that helps us move forward. That helps change who we are to experience something new and to offer that in new ways, and sometimes that's letting go of what we've held on to for so long. That worldview that we demand is the right worldview to have. And sometimes it's just being open to hearing another. Paul writes, "Forgive us our trespasses. I didn't even let my trespassers know they're trespassing. I just listen." Yeah. But do we do a service to them if we just let them trespass without speaking to them? And I think that's part of it too. There has to come a point of this both and of diversity, of support, of connectedness. That's why I truly believe Paul in his letters to the various churches talks about the church as a body, as different members, as things that we all need, so that we can continue, so that we can move forward, so that we can engage with one another and to offer that in new ways and seek to engage one another. Paul says, "I will give my eloquent side of the conversation." I'm sure you will, Paul. But it comes down to beginning and to being open. I think those are some of the hardest things that we do. And I think the biggest challenge for us is to go beyond the me. I wish I would have pulled it up too, but I have a colleague of mine who was in that same class, and he talked about this notion of sacrificing my comfort for the greater good, the community, and Pastor Lee Miller. I can't think of it's not coming to me. I can see it, but I can't pull it up clearly enough to make it sound eloquent as Paul uses. But I think part of us is finding a way through that, is finding an opportunity to be engaged with one another and to have deep conversations, and sometimes painful conversations, but to be willing, and maybe it's putting ground rules in place beforehand, or maybe it's limiting the time of the interaction, or the scope, or both, but allowing language, allowing conversation, allowing opportunity to learn and to begin, grow, even if it's just a tiny bit, so that we can continue to reform and find deeper meaning in our mission and our purpose for ourselves, for the groups that we are part of, and for the world around us. I thank you all for your time, for your conversation. Please don't stop this conversation. Please feel free to continue. If you found this helpful, please share it with someone else that you might think of that might appreciate it. Again, if you watch this later, please feel free to comment, ask questions, and we can, I hope, we'll continue this conversation as we move forward. As I said last week, I'm still working on a couple of things in the hopes that, in the next few weeks or so, I can become tech savvy enough to have maybe one person on to do some conversation with as we move forward. Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Teresa, for your discussion today, and for all of you all who continue to participate in this later on. Take care, everybody. Have a blessed day.